Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Geopolitics with Ramin. I thought I could go through the engagement strategy and the which path to Persia that we have previously been talking about. And in the previous video, we talked about the persuasion strategy in chapter 2 and a little bit in chapter 1 as well. But in chapter 2 specifically, the paper goes through in detail about the engagement strategy. So what is this strategy? At one goal, it's very similar to the persuasion option. So I'll sum it up. Give up its support for allies. Basically, Iran should give up its support for Hezbollah, Palestinian resistance groups, the PMU in Iraq, Ansar Allah in Yemen, and so forth. Give up its nuclear power program and give up its ballistic missile program, which I've previously said that this is the thing that has made sure Iran has stayed alive. Offer diplomatic, strategic, and economic inducements, so attractive that Iran will secure these benefits. That's basically the strategy. So what is the difference really between the persuasion strategy? You go a bit slower. There is no effort in convincing Iran to change its behavior soon. The process is left open to the Iranian government. So there is a small likelihood that it will change its ways, if ever. The assumption is that there is nothing that the United States or the international community can do to prevent Iran from pursuing its nuclear program. There is no mechanism to prevent Iran from supporting its allies. And the paper also talks about, obstructing Arab-Israeli peace, basically, right? The policy conclusively surrenders any potential leverage on Iran to make it do so. So it's up to Iran to do all these things. Basically, if according to this strategy. But the ultimate goal of this strategy, and I will read through a pretty long paragraph here, is for Iran to do all these things eventually, open up to the world, basically make it so that sanctions are gone and all these economic benefits come in. But in doing so, you will infiltrate Iran so much that it will erode the Iranian government and its system from the inside, which will lead to a democratic transition, according to this paper. I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm gonna read this part to you. So, it is ultimately a strategy aimed only at a long-term change, although its advocates would argue that such change is both the only realistic change and the most profound change imaginable. Indeed, at first blush, it would seem that the engagement approach has no ambitions to change the Iranian regime, and this is certainly true in the short term. The hope of engagement is that once this regime no longer feels threatened by the United States or the international community in any way, it will come to believe that improved relations would enhance its own power and stability, and so will choose to change its ways. Indeed, with this approach, success would have to be defined in a way that falls short of achieving any maximalist conception of Washington's ideal aims. Even the best case outcome of engagement, a grand bargain achieved in relatively short time frame, would likely leave unaddressed disturbing Iranian policies, such as Tehran's treatment of the most vulnerable of its citizenry, at least in the short term. Such an optimal and state of engagement would entail an American-Iranian relationship marked by skeptical ties, cooperation within narrow constraints on areas of common interest, and over the long term, the slow expansion of interaction and mutual trust. However, American engagement with Iran, even if successful, will not preclude competition or even tensions. In analogous cases, Iran's uneasy detente with the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia, or America's relationship with China or Libya, rapprochement has not remedied all difficulties. So even with this rapprochement, there has been difficulties. One such case, it mentions Libya and Muammar Gaddafi as an example. And we all know what happened to Libya. Libya was opened up in the 1990s. After years of sanctions, they accused Muammar Gaddafi of also supporting extremist groups and terrorist groups. And it was practically, I think it was Nelson Mandela, if I'm not mistaken, that made sure that Muammar Gaddafi was kind of, welcomed back into the international community, quote unquote, which means the Western world basically would lift sanctions on him. And they did. In the 90s, they lifted up sanctions. Western oil companies invested in Libya. And, then the Arab Spring happened. And the French and the Americans and so many other governments in the West, even the Israelis, if I'm not mistaken, were also involved in this. They were involved in supporting Libyan opposition, and eventually they basically infiltrated the country so much due to Muammar Gaddafi's openness, his liberal reforms, his amnesty program, which allowed the amnesty of even Islamist fighters to come out. And of course the CIA took advantage of this and armed these guys, and eventually led to his death and the destruction of Libya as a nation state as a whole, right? So anyway, the paper continues. Nevertheless, while engagement is routinely criticized as overly accommodating of the internal adequacies of the Iranian regime, proponents suggest that its long-term payoff could exceed its more ambitious alternatives. Although engagement is not directly predicted upon a change in the complexion of Iran's regime, its advocates argue the process itself will provide the most direct and secure path toward altering the political and ideological character of the regime itself. They argue that increasing the level and frequency of interaction between Iranians and the broader world would erode the regime's legitimacy, create new sources and centers of power and influence, shatter the monopolistic controls of crony elites, and generally usher in a more conducive conditions for democratic transition in Iran. There you go. So the proponents of the engagement strategy, they advocate that political change can only come to Iran if the United States backs off from its subversive activities in Iran. This will lead to no justification for the Iranian government to have repressive control. Democracy activism will flourish, and a gradual ascent of democratic forces that emerges from the reformist camp or movement will take over the country eventually, basically. But I will read to finish off this video, because this is more of a summary of the engagement strategy. This paper is pretty long, and I don't want to read the whole thing. Obviously, you can download the PDF from the internet, and you can read the whole paper yourself. I'm gonna plan to do so as well. It's a very interesting paper if you want to really learn about the United States strategy against to basically regime change Iran and further its interests. But however, this is from the paper, and it says here, as I previously summarized. Moreover, many of engagement's advocates contend that the only way profound political change can come to Iran is if the United States backs off, removing the bugbear that the regime uses to justify its repressive controls. In this space, they contend indigenous democracy activists would flourish, and the result would be the gradual ascent of a coalition of democratic forces that they see as already emerging from the wreckage of the reformist movement. The prospects of these assertions coming to fruition are difficult to assess. Normalization and the democratic expansion of economic ties have certainly transformed China by creating a massive middle class, empowering new interest groups outside the parameters of the Communist Party, and corroding the influence of official ideology. Still, but I would say that has backfired, because China today is far more powerful. And yes, it is true, China has obviously changed to a more mixed economy, but it has created a very successful industrial base that has basically outcompeted, or is still outcompeting, the United States and the Western world. So the Communist Party is still the strongest force in the country. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, with the presidency of Xi Jinping, I would say that this has this has made China's position more powerful. It has not been easy to infiltrate, as the United States have claimed. Yes, they are trying to do so by supporting separatism in Taiwan. They did it back in the early 2000s in Tibet. They've also done it in the mid 2010s and the early 2020s in the Xinjiang region by supporting the ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. It was President Donald Trump who removed them from the American terrorist list, as far as I remember. Many of its fighters have been fighting in Syria, along with Jolani's thugs. So these are some of the strategies they've used against China, quite similar to Iran and Russia, supporting terrorist groups, supporting separate ethnic or religious extremist separatist groups, etc. So they haven't really been very successful in China. But this is from 2009, obviously. So China is much more powerful today compared to 2009. But anyway, I will continue. Still, economic liberalization has yet to make a substantial dent in the authoritarian control of the Chinese state or its human rights policies. Well, they actually mentions this here in the next, yeah. In the other situations, particularly the more personalistic autocracy of Muammar Gaddafi's Libya, the prospect that rapprochement with Washington may stimulate meaningful internal progress is highly unlikely. And I talked before what happened to Muammar Gaddafi and Libya. Nonetheless, proponents of engagement with Iran point to its well-developed civil society and its considerable experience with competitive politics, albeit currently only within the narrow constraints permitted by the regime, as indicators that Iran's contested domestic political scene would be well positioned to benefit from the openings provided by engagement. And I mentioned in this paper they would hope that the reformist movement would sort of emerge from the ashes and take over Iran eventually. I as an Iranian, although I never understood why this reformist movement is allowed to flourish, to run around freely in Iran, and half of the upheaval is their fault. Well, to be frank with you, the other half is the conservatives too, because it's the conservatives allows this BS in the name of democracy. Well, I have a news flash for you. Democracy and this type of these window dressing games, they don't work in particular in warlike conditions. And for some reason, the Iranian business class and certain elements of its political elite haven't realized, maybe up until now, of course, but that Iran has been at war with the West and Israel since 1979. It might not have always been, you know, like a physical war, with the exception of the Iran-Iraq war perhaps, or maybe now, but sanctions is warfare. This is economic warfare. It is aimed to make life so miserable for the ordinary citizen, so they will start rioting and overthrowing the government. And for some reason, the Iranian government and this Velayat Faqih system, in my opinion, is extremely ineffective in that sense. If you were a very forceful government, I think you have to be honest, then you would have to have something similar to China or North Korea. You know, get rid of these fifth columnists, I think they believe, right? They are the ones who keep advocating for better relationships with the West, but in the paper it outlines what normalization with the West really means. It's actually infiltration of Iranian society that is meant to erode and destroy the Iranian government at the end of the day. Similar to what they did to Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. They lifted the sanctions, invested in the country, but they slowly infiltrated it, you know, building networks, ties with opposition groups, arming them eventually, and so forth. So I just don't see that. But yeah, that's it for me for today. This was more of a summary, I guess. I told you guys I can only do these short type of clips. So obviously there's a lot more to read about engagement strategy and all of these strategies, but this is more of a summary, and I hope you liked it. If you like it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share my material. Thank you very much.